So then, we are back with the more understandings from the Renewed Covenant from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Israel from the time of the prophets of Yahweh, giving us then the understanding of the time of the end, where nations then would understand the prophecies and times and seasons, and then nations would understand the leadership of China, speaking of a secular rulership in terms of the Messiah spending 2 days with the Samaritans and ended with the Chinese. So then these days where we find then Yeshayahu the 61st chapter, the holy cities laid waste for centuries. We are experiencing then the return of those cities starting then in 2009, when the time of the deceit or the 1,000 years of deceit then had ended, and we are returning to the truth. So then, during this period of time from 2009 until 2031 comes the reduction of time. Nobody knows for how long and how many years. However, we do have the understanding of then the people of Israel, then those who are saved in the Messiah, then clustering as per during the time of Shaul the Shaliach, and then forming the holy city. And the site is going to be Congo, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia in the land of Cush. So then, understanding from the viewpoint of the Messiah, there are many areas where we can explore more other prophecies, but the main point is, what is the focus then of the divine? Because we have then come out of 1,000 years of deceit, and there is the record for us to evaluate. The Messiah had come, and then he spent time with his people during this spring feast. He completed the entire spring feast. Let's ask ourselves, the nation and then the entire land of Israel, they were for more than 1,000 years training the same training at every year after year. Was it easy for Israel to do the transition? No, it was not. It was so tough that a great part of the nation remained as they were after 1,000 years later. Plus. So then, do you think our country then, having this understanding in its infancy, so to speak, do you think it would not have the urge of the other people then returning to the junkies? Oh boy, you can't believe it. The old junkies, they're going to try every situation they can ever try, and plus before to go back to the old junkies. And they are going to use racism whatsoever they can think of. So the only solution to counterbalance the onslaught coming in the future, because we already know the stock market is down. So the indicator is already given. The manipulation of the government and racism already started working, and then what is the outcome of it? Going back to the old junkies, obviously, as with Israel did. During the time of Shaul the Shaliach, most of Israel remained in the old junkies. However, the prophecies went on. And the cities are returning, and as long as we don't have the clear objective of making sure the holy city then is built in order for the people to have a reference point, if we don't have this solid, then we're going to return back to the old junkies. And then we are going to start observing then segregation, KKK, racism of its utmost levels. Because then, from this point on, the nation does not have a firm grip of the holy prophecies. It is the pure outcome. It was during the time of the Messiah, it was during the time of Shaul the Shaliach. And we are coming out of these 1,000 years of deceit. And do you think they are not going to try to get back? Egypt, once then coming out of Egypt, they had the urge of return to the old junkies, did they not? Our country is the same way. They are going to try to return to the old junkies. However, Yahweh has given us then the entire understanding of the time of the end, and we must be wise in pointing the people back to the instructions. Because when you then evaluate the holy city returning, you are pointing people back to the instructions. However, they do as observers. They simply indicate the Hebraic people to return to their services. However, this understanding must be extremely clear, because then people, they have an aim. Rather than festering junks around and then pointing fingers on those people, with their unique relationships and gays and lesbians and so on and so forth, because this is what the other people, they are going to try to do since they lost the election. They're going to try to push for the old junkies. And if we Democrats, we don't have a precise understanding of the time of the end and pointing people to the proper observance of the holy city, then trouble ahead. Because we are dealing with a couple of layers. Try to understand. Unknowingly, we are then going on with a Gentile layer of the 2,000 years, perfectly fine until 2031. However, we understand church was a fraud. What is valid is the holy cities. So then there is no more mixing with the church and state. There is a definite gap, and those are never going to be put together again. So the only option left is making sure the holy cities then is put together. Or they're going to return to the old junkies. However, they can't, but then what they're going to try to do is going to be very damaging. But we, as being Democrats and practical, we must understand the scripture and pointing the people to the city. However, somebody has to go over there in Africa and find a site and then fight the people that Yahweh has set aside for this purpose and start building the holy city. So then every person, when they get to this mode of trying to pointing fingers and finding faults, no. You can find fault in somebody else's work, that's fine. But when you mix God in the midst of it, no, none of it. Please don't. Churches are mere places of charity. Those are charitable organizations. They have no clue of God. But we do. We understand there is a holy city that must come up. So then the choice is in our hands. If we don't point the people to the instructions related with the holy city, then you can expect the old junkies to return. Only returning in theory as in a form of obstruction. It's a natural factor of coming out of slavery or deceit. People always have a desire to return to the junks. And then our strength with Africa should be a whole lot more, because then we must make a deal with the natural resources of the area, so then we can build our new industry based upon then the new technologies, requiring then rare materials. So the combination of both came on time and perfectly, obviously. Yahweh is behind it. Because whosoever controls Congo controls the world's market in terms of new technologies. Then why you understand so much regarding the holy city? It's because you understand the gravity of the situation. That's why you find tabernacling amongst the fears. because the development of the countries are directly related with these rare materials. The main bulk of the materials, forget it, then China is going to produce, obviously. But it's going to become a whole lot more evident when they place their computer system then available. That's going to be the next, shortly, 40 years. And we already have some of these banks already joining up, such as Citigroup and China Bank. If you do a bit of research, you'll find it. That's the starting point. And then not only this, then stock market, and then investments, and then purchasing, and then trade. And then you find ourselves then retrieving from the world as far as our military, and then making friendships with China. Let them deal with it. As long as China can then answer to the UN, then we are in safe ground. Because the main authority point comes from the holy city. The mere fact of having then their word, they would report to UN, then the city, the holy city, is going to be sure of it. So it's an absolutely safe system. However, we must make sure people understand it. And the city must be started. And then you can only receive when then his people, they are in the holy city, sensed, exercised, and then functioning amongst the Gentiles. So if you want to expect any situation from heaven in terms of what goes on in your life, then the city must be ready, because the Hebraic people, they do not function outside of the holy city. And the time of transition from the time of Shaliach Shaul regarding the giving of the Ruach HaKodesh, those times are gone. So the people, in order for them to function, they must be as per plan. And the plan is the holy city. They are not going to function otherwise. So you can't expect much from Yahweh if you don't understand the city. So by the time you are then waiting to receive, you can't, because the city is not yet. When the city then is active, then you receive. So Yahweh's people must go over there in Africa and find the site, find where Yahweh wants the city precisely, and then start building it. Time of rebuilding. Not only of our country, our economy, other nations, and then China. Also the holy city is most important.